Thank you for joining our session here. We'll go ahead and get started right away. Our topic today, maximize communication with Acumatica automation. There's a lot here, and before we get into it, I want to start with just a quick introduction to our team here. And then also too, I want to break down, for those of you that are new to the webinar here, I want to just break down the process and how you can be engaged with us throughout today's session. I'm John with SVA Consulting, part of the business applications team. And I'm joined here with Logan and Tanya. Logan will be walking us through the demonstration, the majority of the demonstration today, and Tanya will be here to help support the webinar as any questions are received. So for those of you that are new, thank you for joining us for the first time. And for those of you that have attended in the past, thank you for coming back. Always good to see familiar faces back on the webinar. As we go through this process, we do have a Zoom chat that you can push any questions our way to. Tanya will be the moderator there and alert Logan and or myself as we go through this process to address those questions. Now, at times, those questions will be directly related to the content that we're covering. And so we'll do our best to address that question at that point in time. But if it's perhaps unrelated to the particular demonstration, we will have a Q&A session at the end where we'll regroup on those questions to make sure we can address them. So again, as you have any of those that come up throughout the presentation today, please feel free to drop them in the chat and we'll get those addressed. All right. So jumping right into today's agenda, we'll start with the benefits of automated communication. A few key points that I want to highlight before we get into the demonstration. And also too, as we think through the automated components, I want to have a quick introduction to the business event process or the business event concept in Acumatica. Now, based off of the attendees of this call, I know that there's a few people here that have experience around this, so hopefully this will reinforce some of those capabilities. And for those of you that haven't utilized these business events, they are a powerful tool that can really be helpful as we think about not only the automated communication, which is a lens we'll be looking at it today, but other areas of Acumatica where we want to see an automated process occur. As we jump into it, we'll go through a demonstration around email templating and standardization capabilities. We'll take a look at the business events and mass automation capabilities that are tied into that. Then we'll also take a look at, as we are sending out communication from the system, as we are handling the templated communication, how are we tracking that? So activity tracking, not only through a master record perspective, but also at a higher level perspective from a dashboard standpoint. So we'll take a look at a few of those options. And then lastly, we'll wrap up with our next steps. When our next webinar is, again, we'll have that Q&A session as well. So I've documented here the 3, 4, and 5. Those will be the key to Logan's demonstration today as we get into it. All right. So to start off, key benefits of automated communication. Really what we're after here is maintaining a standard for communication from a system. As an organization, it's important that we have those requirements fulfilled as we're interacting internally or externally, especially. We want to make sure that we're following the right standard protocol. So we can leverage tools in Acumatica to facilitate that, especially around the reporting structure. Now, Logan's demonstration will get more into the complexities of it, but if we look at just quick wins with reporting, we'll see that we have the capability to, in a templated format, send out reports on a periodic basis. So what I'll show here, just a quick demonstration around this. I'm going to jump into my project profitability report, and I'm going to bring over my Acumatica demo screen. For those of you that have run many reports in Acumatica, you'll notice a number of buttons here at the top. For those of you that have edit capabilities, you'll see the edit report function as well in the toolbar here. As we look at running certain reports, we can leverage a very basic tool in Acumatica to distribute those. Sometimes this can be internally. They can be reports that are sent to yourself if you want daily checks from Acumatica on certain areas, certain reports. Again, those can be tailored to you or a group of individuals if we're sending it out to a team. So in this project profitability report, I'm just going to run it open here so we can see it. We just have in the demo site a very basic view into each of our individual projects and that profit margin by those. As I look at the parameters here, we can gauge the templated reports based off of any parameters we select. So for instance, here we could select this based off of a project manager. to execute a templated communication to that project manager. We can also do it at a customer or a project level. Our templates allow us to save that communication so that it is, again, the standard for which we distribute that particular report. I'm going to simplify it here. I'm going to keep this open, and I'm going to go into my printed email settings. And this is where I can distinguish certain aspects of the report as it gets distributed. So I'm just going to jump in here and write, here we'll do project profitability here. I'm going to enter in my own email address to have this distributed. All right. And what I'll do here at the top, I'm going to just save this as a template. And again, if I were to save the templated structure, that would keep any report parameters that I have defined. So this is, again, just a basic tool in Acumatica that can help facilitate the reports. And just so I can distinguish this one, we're going to do our demo today. I'll go ahead and save that. Now, what you can do is you can also make sure that it's a shared template to the team, or you can keep it individualized. From here, I'll go ahead and schedule this template, and I'll include it in my weekly financial report distribution. But for the sake of the demonstration today, I want to make sure that we're able to take a look at the actual execution of this report template. So I'm going to go into my send reports here. All right, I'm going to do a refresh. Give it 1 second here as the send reports. Let's see if I might have to enter this page here separately. Let me go ahead and open it up here. All right. You can see I have the ability to now in my send reports queue. This is a separate queue in Acumatica. If you aren't able to see it in your environment, you might need to expose it through a sitemap, which we can help assist with. You can see that the template is now logged in this queue for me to send. And so I had saved it to a weekly reporting schedule, which I'll show in just a moment. But for the sake of our distribution today, I'm going to go ahead and just distribute this report. Go ahead and process this. As it gets processed, Acumatica is going to send me an email. And I'm just going to take a minute to speak to this page as Acumatica shares over that email, and I'll bring it up. What you'll see in the templated communication under send reports is I have this icon here, which will allow me to add a schedule to the report distribution. So we can do an individual send of the report, or we can add a schedule to it. And usually, in this case, it's most helpful to have a schedule to it. That's the purpose of setting up the template, to have that standardized process so it can just get distributed as needed. If I select this report, for instance, and I want to add it to my schedule here, you'll be brought into our automation schedule screen for which we can set that up. Now, this will look pretty familiar to, say, an Outlook template, for instance, where you can set up the parameters for which the report is being distributed on a daily basis at a certain time, or perhaps certain days of the week. I can send this Monday, let's do Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Maybe I'm sending this to my project managers, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Perhaps I have a financial report package that I want to send out on a monthly basis, perhaps to myself for internal review before I distribute it. And you'll notice that you can define those automation schedule parameters here for which this process will run. Now, hopefully at this point, I've received my email, and here it is. Always helpful when it actually does kick out the email in a live demonstration. So we'll see here the project profitability report that has been sent to my email queue here, and it has automatically attached that PDF. All right. And again, this is based off of the parameters I have for that report. So that's being sent with wide open parameters. I haven't specified myself as a project manager, but I could do that in this case. And I'll minimize it here, and I'll bring it back to this screen. What you also see here in this queue, and I have these set up for our balance sheet and our profit and loss, I have these set to merge in my weekly reporting package. And what this allows is you can see this designation here that's set within my template. We can have a merging order that says, okay, I want to distribute a few reports. And in that process, I want to make sure that I have the priority reports at the top. So in this case, I have a P&L statement and a balance sheet. Now, as I execute this, for instance, we'll go ahead and open up the email here. I didn't execute this. I have this one ready, but we'll see our merged report list here of a profit and loss statement and a balance sheet. So we can not only set up automated reporting directly from Acumatica through this simple process, and Logan's going to get into some more complex processes for us. But we can also merge a grouping of reports. So as we think through the capabilities within Acumatica, I want to make sure that we are first aware of some of the quick hits that we can have through the reporting function. And I know I focus on the projects and the balance sheet, but if I just go into any reporting, I go into, say, my cash account summary here, you're going to see that ability to save a template as a report, and it'll show up on that Send Reports queue for you to distribute. So quite a range that's available here as we think through just standardized reporting. As I jump back into this, so that is focusing the reporting structure in a more simplified way for those standard reports that we have in Acumatica. Another key benefit that we want to drive out and understand today is the ability to set up consistent branded communication. So in my demonstration, I had probably a less than flattering email here. Logan will take us through some of the more enhanced capabilities for proper templated communication so that we can adhere to any marketing standards that we have as we communicate with customers, prospects, communicate with suppliers, that we can have that properly defined and distinguished with Acumatica. Overall, what we're really trying to accomplish is the ease to which we conduct business. And I want to emphasize this particular point as we think through some internal capabilities specifically. As we think about having notifications, reports, triggers in Acumatica, what we really want to make sure is that as we perform our functions in the system, that communication that we've already set up, we've taken the time on the front end, so that as we go through this process, that communication that's been set up is being distributed. Perhaps it's a weekly approval queue to your team members that are providing confirmation on a pending purchase order. You have an approval map around that. Maybe on a daily basis, we send out communication to say, hey, you have 2 or 3 POs that are pending your review. Please log in and accept or reject those POs so they can move through our queue. We want to set up these triggers to, again, make the process by which we conduct business simpler, easier. And then lastly, as we have these things going on, what's really helpful for us is to make sure that we maintain traceability and tracking of that communication. So Logan will highlight some of those activities as we go through this process, how we can make sure we track it in the system. All right. And before I turn it over to Logan, one thing that I just want to emphasize here is the business event side. So our business event in Acumatica really helps us fill in the gaps where maybe the mass processing capabilities of running the email process for sending customer invoices or customer statements, or the report process that I just showed where we have a report that we just want to schedule and we want to send it out on a regular basis. Where we have gaps in the system, we can utilize business events to say, you know what, under this unique set of circumstances, I wanted to distribute this communication, or I want to perform this action. And all that business event is a trigger. So as we take a look at a few of the components here, and I'm just going to advance these forward here, we have a number of things that surround the business events. We can have generic inquiries that define certain fields for which we monitor to say if this information changes, I want to distribute communication, or I want to perform a change in the system. We can accommodate through this process the notification templates that Logan will walk us through. We can also have a notification schedule within these business events to say, as this happens, I want to perhaps collect that information and on a periodic basis distribute it. We can also, within the business events, define very easily the subscriber type. So do we want to send out text messages if we have an SMS set up an integration within Acumatica? Do we want to just send an email, as I did? Do we want a push notification on the mobile app? We can have those different subscribers defined within our business event. And then also too, through this process, through the business event screen, you'll be able to see attach reports and data fields that support the business event itself. So as communication is being distributed, I want to attach a PDF. I want to attach a generic inquiry. I want to have this information attached for the individuals that are going to be on the receiving side of this. So as we transition here, let me jump back into my PowerPoint. Go ahead and fly through this. I'll turn it over to Logan here to demonstrate the notification templates to start. And we'll get into that detail. Then we'll highlight the capabilities with the business event side as well.
All right. Thanks, John. I'll go ahead and share out my screen here.
Stop sharing. All right. Thank you, Logan.
One small thing to note here. So in that graphic, it was called the notification template. As of 22R2, I believe this has changed to email template. Those are the same thing, kind of interchangeable, just a naming convention thing that has changed in previous versions of Acumatica. But on that note, we'll start in the system management module within the Acumatica site, and we'll navigate to the email templates underneath our email preferences. If you navigate to the screen in your site, you're going to see a bunch of just generic templates set up automatically by Acumatica for things like documents awaiting your approval. We can see we have that for AP bill, AP check, invoice template, so sending out invoices. We'll have one for sales quotes as well. It's actually one we're going to be looking at today. So I'll go ahead and type in just the quote up in our search bar. We'll see a few, but to start, we'll take a look at just the CR quote notification. A few things right away, just to note, are going to be we need to set a default screen for this email template. So in this case, we're sending out sales quotes. So I want to designate the screen as the sales quote screen. Our from address is just that. So what system email we want to be sending this communication out of. We'll then see a few dynamic fields in Acumatica. So this will update depending on the quote that we are sending out. This is drawing from the quote contact email, is going to be receiving the email. We can also CC internal individuals, for example, maybe the owner of a sales quote in this case, who's responsible for being up to date on that activity. On the note of dynamic data fields, so we can see here in the subject line, we could include things like the quote business account, the sales quote number. Again, these fields will update automatically based on the quote that we're sending out. We also have a static data field. So for example, that is available for viewing, sales quote number, those things will stay the same on every email that's sent from this email template. I won't get too into the details here, but just show generally what it looks like to add in a data field. If I were to change this, let's say to, instead of quote contact first name, we also want to include the last name. We could go ahead and insert a data field here. We'll see a lot of different fields here to choose from. Don't worry too much about the specifics. It can be a little bit overwhelming, but in this case, if we're going to the quote contact, you want to add in that last name, we'll just see we have that option right here for the quote contact last name. That will then pull in the database in Acumatica that will link it to a dynamic data field, and this will populate when we send out this email communication. For the static data fields, it's as simple as going in here. If we want to change this dear to hi, we could change that in any email going out. We'll then have hi rather than dear. And I'll go ahead and change this shading here real quick and then save this template. Attached reports. So if, for example, we're sending out a sales quote, we would attach the sales quote report. They're able to view that on the email communication as well. And then the send by events, we'll get into that in a minute here, but that is related to the business events that John alluded to, the automated processing of email communication. Again, this is a pretty generic quote template, and they are just that. So these can be good starting points for creating more specific email communication, maybe more stylized to your business. So if I actually just exit out of here and go back to our email template screen, we'll see that for quotes, I have 3 different templates set up here. So one for Canada, Mexico, and the United States. that is just based on the entity structure of my demo site. We have those 3 entities set up, and we can actually set up default communication for branches as well. So I could have, let's say, 5 different quote templates for each branch, as well as separate for each company. So I'll go ahead and click into just the top one here. So our Canada quote. We'll see a lot of this is going to be the same information as what we had on the generic quote template. I do recommend kind of using those for starting, at least if you're not very familiar with the data fields within Acumatica. This can be helpful for pulling in things like, oh, we want to send it to the quote contact email. You want to CC the owner field. It'll default in things like the screen. We can simply use the copy and paste function up at the top. The customized design then comes in kind of the message summary field at the bottom here. So you can see added in a border on the outside, added in the Canadian flag for this Canada email communication, also added in things like the phone number, website we want customers to visit when we're sending out this communication. One helpful kind of trick for customizing these templates is it's actually directly linked to Word. So if I were to, let's say, copy and paste just the text here into a Word document and pull it over here, we can actually edit things like the text color, the size of the text. And I actually also added in the border that you see in the template just through Word and copy and pasted it directly into the template in Acumatica. If I were to just go ahead and copy this updated text color and then paste it in here, we'll see that text color updated. Again, this might not be the best example, as that might be pretty easy to update in Acumatica. Just a helpful tip to know that you can update it through a Word document if you are more familiar with the functionality in Microsoft Word rather than the email templates within Acumatica. I'll go ahead and discard that change. Just for some context, I set up a few additional ones. So as we'll see, we have one for the United States, another one of the branches within Acumatica, and then I also created one for Mexico. So we'll see those 3. I'll kind of demonstrate how we send those out, the customized communication here in a second. So for actually sending out this communication, I'll go into the sales quote screen, because again, that is a screen that we have designated for this email template. I'll jump into the opportunities and we'll pull up one of our quotes. From here, if we want to manually send out one of the emails based on our templates, we could go into the ellipses here and create an email. Here we're going to see a complete listing of all of our templates. In this case, we would obviously want to choose one related to sales quotes. For demonstration purposes, I'm just going to select the Mexico quote template. This is originating from the Canada branch. That might not be accurate, but again, just for demonstration purposes, I'll go ahead and populate this here. We'll see those dynamic data fields such as the quote number and the name of our contact are going to automatically populate, with things like the phone number staying static. You can also hard code in things like the sign off. We have our flag that automatically populated based on the template. This is just that, again, a template. So if we wanted to code in here, let's add in a last name. Change anything else here, we have that ability to do so. When you're manually sending out these emails, it's not going to automatically send just because you generate it based on the template. We can make modifications, and then we'll actually hit the send up here in the top left. Now we'll see that screen kind of closed out. If you want to say, did that send? Where did that email go? Underneath our activities tab for the quote, we're now going to see that this email sent out, and we can track this within the activities tab of the sales quote itself. And this will also funnel into the business account attached to this quote. So I'll just go ahead and hit this pencil. This will pull up the business account record. And we'll then see in the activities here, we're going to have that same quote that was sent, tracked on with a quote, and also on the business account itself. A more automated way of sending out the emails, so again, this kind of was manually going in and selecting that template, is actually the send action within the sales quote screen. If I were to go ahead and hit send, We can see another activity was automatically populated. So as we are in the Canadian branch, this is a sales quote for the Canadian entity. It automatically knew to pull this template and update it with information specific to this sales quote. So again, we'll see that quote number, the contact name, things like that are going to automatically pull in based on how we set up our defaults. So if I was creating a quote from the Mexico branch, it would pull in the Mexico email template. This is set within either our preferences, which would be a more generic way of setting the default email templates, or by our classes. So in this case, we'll go into the business account classes screen. And we'll select the business class here. Within the mailing and printing, we'll kind of see how this is set up. So we have all of our branches listed. Each one of these is for the quote, or the sending of the quote. For each branch, we can have a different email template set up. So again, it's still pulling in the sales quote report. It's attaching that to each one of our emails, but it is using a different templated information. So either the Canadian one that we just saw, the Mexico one in that entity, United States, etc. This is not specific to sales quotes or the marketing module. So for example, if we went into the receivables module, went into our customer classes, we can set defaults in the same way that we set the default for quotes. Underneath our mailing and printing settings. So as you can see, if I expand this mailing ID, always fun. All right, there we go. So for things like dunning letter, invoices, sending out quotes, we could set different branches with different templates. Just demonstrating this is not specific to one individual module. I know I'm showing you for quotes. We have the same capability, for example, for sending out quotes, invoices, dunning letters, things of that nature.
And so I think, Logan, an important point here is that these preferences for the email communication, as Logan walked through it from the actual email process, or if you're using a mass email process in Acumatica, it's going to pull from these mailing and printing settings that are handled in a tiered structure. So at the preference level, you have that set. In a AR module here, for instance, you would also have it at the class level, so the customer class.
Yep.
And then you can distinguish even more direct communication within the profile itself. So on an individual customer record, you'll also see a set of mailing and printing settings. Acumatica works in that tiered structure, so the more granular you become with those definitions, that's how Acumatica will distribute the communication. So
that's a great.
Oh, go ahead, Logan.
Yeah, it's a great point, John. I was just showing the more general, as you said, it's a tiered approach. So the accounts receivable preferences will be just a catch-all for all customer classes. Let's say at the customer class level, you can have more granular information set. And then again, at the customer level, like John mentioned, even more granular in that tiered structure.
And Acumatica will pick up that communication as it's updated. So if, Logan, you modified the customer class, all the customers within that customer class will follow that communication protocol from this point forward. So any email that gets sent, it'll pick up that template. And what is also an important distinction here is that branch piece that Logan has for Canada, the US, Mexico. That's being defined as its own individual record. So we would see in, Logan, if you wouldn't mind going back to that quote example.
Yep.
We'll see those lines repeated, but what's differentiated is that branch setting where Logan has then defined a separate email template. So we can see the CR quote is repeated multiple times. We can see Canada, West and East for the United States, and then Eastern and Western for Mexico, and he's established a unique template for each branch. So by default, Acumatica will not know that you've created that template until you push it into a mailing and printing or some sort of a definition. So Acumatica knows when you're in that branch, it'll pick up the communication.
All right. Then I think the fully automated kind of version of sending out email communication is the business events, like we have mentioned. So I'll go ahead and navigate to that screen within the system management module. We can think of this as somewhat of an alternative to some of the native mass processing functions we have within Acumatica. So I guess actually returning back to the receivables module, a good example of this would be sending out customer statements, for example. So if I go into the prepare state or print and statement screens, I can see that we have the action of email statement. So if we had for a certain statement cycle, we could send this out to all of our customers at one single time and as a mass email process. But the business events can help are for things that aren't included in our native mass processing screens. We can set up business events. So if I navigate back here to the business event screen, I have one set up here just for sales quotes. I'll go ahead and click into it. As we've alluded to previously, it is linked to a screen. So for this one, I just linked it to the sales quote screen. And then there is going to be a trigger mechanism associated with that for sending out, in this case, it's called subscriber. That is just going to be our email template. So in this case, every time a record is inserted on the sales quote screen, it's going to automatically send out the email that we have associated with it. I just set the generic CR quote notification to take a look at to start. And so each time a new record is added, it sends out that quote notification.
And the business event process here is really just a trigger mechanism. That's all it is. We have what those conditions are and what the output of those conditions should be once it meets our operation. It's just that equation, and it can be applied in many different ways. And Logan, if you go under the type for the trigger by record change,
yep.
So we can have, let's select trigger by action, for instance. Under the action name, we can have more complexity around that to say, based off of certain actions within the system, I want to trigger an event. I want to send a notification. I want to perhaps perform another process. You can get into import scenarios. I think we have other content around that, but keeping it in the realm of notifications, we can have a variety of actions that we follow to distribute these. So very dynamic. And I think the important piece here is that it can help fill in some of those gaps. Or in one classic example is such things as approvals. In Acumatica, anytime a document goes into pending approval, it can trigger a notification through the preferences. But sometimes what's more logical is we use a business event to queue up all those approvals so that on a periodic basis, say every day or 3 days a week, we distribute that communication to the approval team. So they receive only one notification. That's, okay, here's what's in my queue. Let me go in and approve those. So quite a bit of dynamic capabilities with this functionality.
Yep. Another common one would be like sending out remittance information to vendors, things like that we can have set up. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Anything else you want to add there on the business events, John?
Yeah, I would say the ACH remittance information is another great example, as we are actually deploying Nacha files. So we're distributing the ACH information to our bank portal. We can have a business event trigger to say, okay, hey vendor, expect this information in your bank account within the next 2 to 4 days, or to our employees if we're reimbursing them through ACH. Hey Logan, I'm reimbursing the $150 Chipotle meal that you had. Even though I don't know how you spent the $150 on Chipotle, here it is, and it'll be in your account.
And we can certainly assist you in the process of creating these business events and inquiries that are feeding into them. It's just good to know that they're there. We do have that capability. We can help you in the process. All right. Another component we wanted to show was the email tracking or communication tracking within Acumatica. So from a system management perspective, all of our emails are going to, let's see where we have the all emails queue here. All right. In the all emails queue underneath the time and expense module, I was looking in the wrong area, system management module, but this will show us all of our communication coming out or coming into Acumatica, depending on how we have the system configured. So we can see we have our outgoing emails queue. This is just going to show us all of our emails, whether they processed, did they fail to send? Was there not an email associated with the account we're trying to send it to? Was email processing turned off for whatever reason? This is just a good catch-all for looking at all of the communication coming out of the system. We can also track incoming emails. For example, if we had this turned on to send and receive emails through our system email accounts, the all emails is kind of a catch-all place for that communication. We can also create more custom kind of views for our data. So I put together just a quick email summary as kind of a basis for something we could put together. So you can see we can look at our emails pending processing, emails that failed. We can also, if we have multiple system email accounts, narrow that down for saying one specific system email account if applicable. We've added in the outgoing emails. So we just took a look at all-in-one consolidated view. And if there's any areas of particular interest, let's say the monthly quote activity, as we're talking through that today, we could add in that as well as a widget. These are very customizable. So any areas of interest for information, we can consolidate into one single place. Another dashboard or another way you could potentially use this is actually a native dashboard for Acumatica, the customer view. So if we had a customer who wanted to view more specifically our activities, so this recent activities in the bottom right is going to be all of the activities coming out of the system. But if there's one customer of interest, I think we're looking at the Afton Blade customer today. So we can see the activity with that customer. We'll see that at the bottom right, not just necessarily emails. If we had tasks and things like that, we could track that within a dashboard. We see some other miscellaneous widgets for things like opportunities and orders, as well as sales by month.
Yeah, so I think, Logan, the first dashboard you showed is more around system management. Yep. I want to see emails that are going in and out of the system. We have that queue, but we can also have easier to consume statistics on top of that through dashboard style. This one is more on the customer facing side. I want to see the direct activity for a certain customer, or perhaps on the project side, I want to see the communication that falls under the projects within my tier. I'm a project manager assigned to 10 projects. I want to see the activity of my team. So we can use a format like this. And again, we have out of the box versions similar to this. We can also customize those dashboards to track that activity. What's important to note is where that activity is. And as Logan showed on the quote, that was within the actual sales quote itself, for that actually being distributed out of the system. And then for the prospect or customer that it was assigned to. So all we're doing in this format is just pulling in that data that already exists on those master profiles, so that you as a user can see a consolidated form of that activity. This one is focused around email notifications that we've distributed for quotes. But if you think about assigning tasks to individual team members in Acumatica, you can track those in a similar fashion as well. And so quite a bit of flexibility around the dashboarding side to see a well-rounded picture of the communication that's being distributed from the team. And Logan, can you actually drill to one of those emails?
Yeah.
That'll bring it up here.
Let's see if it can load for us.
Maybe grab it.
We might just have to go into the header.
But if we have this email activity that's coming in, we can also see, if we ever need to, we can do a quick check around the templated communication that's going out to make sure that, again, our team is using the templated notifications that we've agreed upon, so that we're communicating in the right way from perhaps one entity to another to those customers that are within that entity. So it can act as a check there.
All right. I think I was able to cover everything I had for the system demonstration here, so I can go ahead and stop sharing and pass back to you, John.
So we've taken a look at the three main demonstration topics: the email templating and standardization around that. So we're going to cover it across the 3 different countries in his global business here. The business events and mass automation that support that, and then the activity tracking and dashboarding capabilities. So as we take a look ahead here, let me go ahead, share back out my screen. You'll see that if you have any questions around this, you can contact us either through the website or directly. Also, too, coming up, we have our next webinar in October. And I'm just going to do a quick check. Logan, can you see my deck here? Okay, perfect. We have in October another webinar that'll be on the schedule. Our goal there is to review the newest functionality. So 23R2 will be the topic of that one. Those new features are always fun to see what Acumatica has brought into the biggest release, or the one of two big releases every year. Acumatica releases R1 front end of the year and R2 at the tail end of the year. So this one will be for the 23R2 capabilities. And then also too, what you'll notice here is just a link to our webinar series on YouTube. So for those of you that are new, again, thank you for joining for the first time. We have documented all of the webinars to date under the SVA Consulting YouTube channel, under the Acumatica webinars playlist. What we also like to encourage is Acumatica community. So as you go through the learning the system, or you have questions on the system, going to the Acumatica forum can be helpful to see others that may have also encountered similar issues or are asking the same questions. And you, a part of that community, can comment, share, and vote on feature ideas that Acumatica will respond to. So a few points of contact here. And again, hopefully you can join us in October for the new features review. Now with that, I think we have a few minutes for any questions. I do want to make sure here that we have an opportunity to address those.
Yeah, John, there is one thing, but I think we need to take it offline and do a deeper dive and then re-communicate back out to the group.
Okay. Yeah, and I think, so I see it here around some of the formatting that comes from the email templates. And there might be some changes to how it displays within an actual email. If you're using Outlook, or if you're using Gmail, the output of that might look different, but what can be helpful and what I would probably check is utilizing some of the simpler tactics to make sure that the notification template is formatted appropriately based off of, as Logan showed, Word. Microsoft Word can be really helpful of having that pre-drafted to maintain the formatting. We've seen that help, but that could be on a case-by-case basis, something that we would just need to look into how it's being formatted on the receipt side of the email. And go ahead and address that. But I would say usually using something like Word can help set that formatting in place within the email notification. Any other questions, Tanya?
Not at this time.
All right. Well, I think with that, and if we'll just give it a couple seconds here, I don't see anything being dropped in the queue here. Thank you to everybody here for attending today's session, and we hope to see you at the October one. We cover 23R2 new features of Acumatica. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.